I want to start saying thank you to everyone who joined us today. Specifically, thank you to Katariina and Liam for being with us this morning, and also to everyone that sent questions prior to this call. This is really what makes the CSN breakfast a really lively moment with each other. Just a couple of quick house rules before we get into it. This is recorded, as I said, so will be shared with all of you a couple of days later. If you can all be on mute, but I can see that everyone is, so that it's ideal for the speakers and me to hear each other. Any questions that you have, you can share them on Slido. So I did pop the link in the chat, but I also have the QR code here. Should it be easier for you. And again, as we're saying with Katariina at the beginning, if there is any technical difficulties, if the Zoom for some reason just stops, we will join back on the same link. So don't you worry at all about it. That was it for me. I am Rary Ratsifa, your host for today for the CSN breakfast, and I am in a client success role today at Bazaar Voice, and I'm joined by Katariina and Liam. Katariina, would you like to kick us off and introduce yourself?
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Rary, for the invitation to join this discussion. I can rant about change management for the whole day, but let's keep it to the time that we have today. But as you introduced me, my name is Katariina Juvonen, and I head the internal communication at Smartly. If you're not familiar with Smartly.io, we are an ad tech scale-up from Finland, building a product optimizing social media advertising in media buying and creative, supported by services. Currently, we are almost 700 people in 16 offices from Sydney to San Francisco, 60 plus nationalities, and a pretty fast scaling, both in terms of revenue and organization currently. I've been with Smartly for about 3 years. The first internal comms person to join at the time. And well, you can imagine I've done bits and pieces here and there across the comms board, from information flow to strategy and change communication, people engagement. A lot of things within the last 3 years. How do I relate to customer success? I have a background in communication consultancy, so I've been doing customer work for a long time before I joined Smartly. In a variety of projects including change management and M&As, to mention a few. So I do know what you are struggling with in customer success as well. But that's it for me.
Wow, thank you for sharing. And how about you, Liam?
Yeah, thanks, Rary, and I'm absolutely honored to be on here talking with you and Katariina. I'm looking really excited to the discussion we're going to have. I'm the head of value consulting in EMEA for Okta. For those of you that don't know Okta, identity access management. So think about when you log onto your computer, the single sign-on giving you access to all those different apps with one login, but looking to do it in a safe, secure way that also creates a great experience for your employees, but also your customers. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I've been at Okta for about 6 months. But previous to that, I've worked for a number of technology and consulting companies, both from a sort of business transformation point of view, whether it be sort of advising customers on change management, or whether it be as a consultant actually delivering the change management program, or actually like partnering with sales in order to kind of identify for customers what the value of the change they could make would be. So when Katariina and I first sort of met in preparation for this call, we were both quite excited about each other's different point of views that can come to some of the questions that have come today. So excited to hear from Katariina as much as I am here to kind of like give my own spin on things as well.
Well, it is an absolute pleasure to have you both. Thank you so much for being with us again, and to have impressive background, as you both stated in your introduction. And yeah, I think we can start with our first question, is to give us a little bit of a definition of what is change management. We're starting from the basics here. So Liam, if you want to head start.
Yeah, and I apologize because I tend to get quite cheesy with some of my analogies and things. So I'll make the apology up front. But
like cheese.
the way that I look at change management is the inevitable people aspect of innovation. And I think I've noticed a lot of change in the last few years, but beforehand, change management used to be kind of a bit of a dirty word. It was something like something that you had to do when you bought something, or whether you were looking to change your strategy, whatever. But actually, change management is inevitable. It's not something that you can ignore. It's not something that you can wait until you've got somebody on board to do it professionally. It's one of these things that actually it happens every day. You have to do it every day. You have to get ahead of it, otherwise you get left behind.
Beautiful. And what about you, Katariina?
Yeah, I'm fully agreeing with Liam here. And I'm really happy for the change that is happening around change management as well. So that's not just like, oh yeah, we have to do this as well. Well, this is annoying. Maybe the comms can do that very quickly and not use any resources for that. But I think if we talk about like defining change management in its simplest form, is the processes and practices of how do we enable and make the wanted change happen. Because that's why we make change. We actually want to execute that and put that in practice. And how do we get people on board, and how do we support people in building resilience for the change? Because as Liam, you were saying, like it happens every day. It's not a project that has a start and end. It could have, but it's continuous. So how do we support people in that? And of course, we can talk about organizational level or team level or individual level, but I think eventually change always happens on an individual level. And I have a lot of favorite organizational rants, but organizations don't change, people change. Like there's no change happens unless people decide to do the changes. So it is very much a people topic.
I completely agree with you. And actually, this leads us really beautifully to our next question, which is, as you're saying it, the issue with changes is that, people have mostly done things a certain way. And when you do come to them with like something new is happening in the company, and they've done things a certain way for a while, it's really difficult for them to do things differently. I say them, but it is really difficult for me to do anything differently, especially if I'm set in a certain way. And we'd love to hear about how you nudge people to accept a new behavior, because that is really the bread of it, right? Katariina, I see you smiling, so we'll start with you.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think us humans, we don't want to change by nature. That's because it's unpleasant and it requires work. And everyone knows, as you were saying, Rary, that if we try to build new habits, even in our personal life, it sucks. Nobody wants to do that. And it doesn't really change if you're in a work context. And I find it really funny because I think everyone wants change, but no one wants to change. And like if you ask who wants to lead the change, you see even less hands up in the air for that. But it is hard work. And it's a strenuous exercise and it requires time and effort. But coming back to the actual question there, like how do you nudge people? People need to understand the why. Very Simon Sinekian way of starting, like start with the why and the context and the need for change. Leaders need to paint the picture and the goal in mind, kind of like the oasis that we're going towards, independent of the change that we're going through. What's the future we're aiming for? And I think with change, everyone wants to know what's in it for me, and what do I have to do? These are the basic questions, like, okay, what do I get out of it? Or kind of like, what's the harm in it for me? And what do I have to do personally? And I think the last point that I want to make here is that when we talk about change management, we often talk about the change curve, the U curve. So people move through the change in different phases and different times. So how do we help people go through the resistance, achieve acceptance, and then even commit to the change? Because it doesn't really, like, if we talk about how do we make the change happen, like accepting it's not enough, but how do we commit to that and actually do the work on an individual level as well?
Thank you for sharing that. What about you, Liam?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with anything Katariina said. I love the mention of why. And I think with the why piece, even when I'm like partnering with sales in a sales process, I'll ask the salesperson, like, why are we talking to this customer? And if they can't give me a good answer, I'll ask the customer that as well. Like, how did we get here? How are we having this conversation? Because what I want to understand is what pain has driven them to this point. So the similar reason that Katariina mentions is like understanding the whys is super important. And I think the next piece, and here comes another cheesy line from me, which is trust is the currency of change. So when we talk about looking at things from an individual level, what I always do when I run a change management program is look to build value propositions for each individual that's going to be affected by the change. And similar to Katariina said, like understanding what their motives are and what impact it's going to have on them, so that you can build those targeted value propositions around, this is why we're making this change and this is why it's going to be good for you. Because that's how you build that trust that around, it's not just some senior person that's bought a new piece of technology or read a book about a cool new strategy. It's actually like, this is going to make business impact and this is how it's going to impact you.
How, Liam, if you can give us kind of like that timeline, how long does it take to actually see that change happen? It may be a tricky one, but maybe no.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to give you a lazy answer here, but it's like, it obviously depends, right? And Katariina mentioned like the change curve that you get kind of like early adopters that jump in straight away and are able to start picking it up. You get people that kind of see other people having success and look to jump on from it. And that leads on to that bit that I talked about around like trust being the currency of change. And I talk a little bit more sometimes around peer-to-peer and how you can actually accelerate further change through, instead of being like the director or the VP or the C-suite, like being the exec sponsor and pushing the change, actually like turning over their shoulder and seeing a peer that's adopted the change and had some quick wins is a really good way to kind of like accelerate that. So it depends on the complication of the project, obviously. Like I've seen effective change management projects run in 2-3 months, but I've also seen them take 2 years, right? So it can be depending on the complications, depending on the amount of change, and depending on the appetite for change as well. Whenever I've kind of like scoped a change management project for a consulting piece, like one of the key factors that I look at, and one of the things I assess a customer is their appetite for change. So you get some customers that are looking to innovate, they're always innovating, which can be a super positive because they're used to change. They also might be a little bit exhausted from change as well, which could slow things down. But additionally, like if they've got the right foundations to be able to change, then you're in a good position, right? And if they've got a project team, they've got a change network, they talk about different levels of people that are going to be pushing that change as well, then that's the ones that get super excited.
I can see that. See, you're very passionate about it, and thank you for sharing that. And Katariina, it'd be really interesting to have your point of view around how do you communicate changes, you know, and how do you communicate the why in that process? If you have any example that you've had recently, that would be really helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think my colleagues have heard me ask the why annoyingly many times, and always, what's the context? Give me the context. So what's the context? What's the background? What's the reasons for the need to change? It can be operating environment, it can be customers, it can be microeconomics, or one small pandemic that was brought on us. So given that, like, okay, this is what's happening around us or within us, and starting with that, and then what we want to do, and I think that's relevant for everyone, that how do we link it to our purpose, our vision, our strategic goals? Our vision at Smartly is to make every day of advertising easy, effective, and enjoyable. And we can always link to that, well, when we think about our product roadmap, for instance. So if we're building this new stuff, is it actually providing for us becoming easy, effective, and enjoyable for our customers? And everybody gets that kind of like the connection. We have also lifelines, like high-level long-term goals that we've defined. One of them is profitable growth. We have certain aspirations to grow at a certain pace and be profitable at a certain pace. And when we make decisions, we always come back to that. Like, is this serving our profitability? And people can understand the linkage there as well. Like, okay, we need to be a bit more conscious about using company money now. It's because it's feeding to keep up with the profitable growth. I can't highlight enough culture and values. I think that's a very essential part of making it everyday life, and kind of like always circling back to this is how we've all agreed to work in our organization. For instance, one of our values is work smartly. And if we're implementing new processes, practices, tools, is this enabling us to work more smartly? And if not, kind of like building the why around that, like, hey, I know it's annoying and it's a new level of processes that you need to adopt, but eventually it will help us work more smartly. And maybe the last point that I would mention here is what's your strategy, and how can we make the argumentation around, okay, this is the need we need to do, and it's supporting our strategy. We have in our strategy defined strategic pillars, which kind of like are the core competitive advantages that will make us successful. One of them is leading technology and engineering. We want to be the fastest moving player in the industry. So if that's the goal, what do we need to do differently? And it's not easy I think we have hundreds of developers already in our organization. So how do we make those changes if it's not comfortable, but we need to do that if we want to achieve being the fastest moving player? So painting the picture and kind of like connecting it to the strategy, the vision, the values that we all share. So that would be my step towards communicating the why.
No, very, amazing steps. And whilst you were doing all of them, what were the, I'd say 3 key leadership mistakes that you've actually seen happen? Because it's great to do all of this, but then obviously it's never perfect. So this is why we're here. Please spill the tea on everything.
I love it. I think, and it's not just in our organization, it's something that I've seen for a long time in a lot of organizations, that leaders who often prepare the changes in advance, they might have been talking about it for months. And then now we're ready to share something to the organization or initiate the sort of like the change process. And the leaders are so sick and tired of all that already at that point. They just want to get it out of their hands and move to the next thing. But that's the first point people hear about it. And kind of like having the patience and not hurry with the change. And again, kind of like pace it with people who move in different times. That yes, you need to kind of like, you've been knee deep in that for a long time, but that's the first time people hear about it, especially if they haven't been engaged in preparing the change before that. So maybe that's the first one. Relating to that lack of repetition, change needs time, as Liam was saying, like it could be 2-3 months, or it could be 2 years, or the change never happens. That's an option as well. I think there's an old marketing wisdom that says that you need to hear a message 7 times before you actually understand or remember that. So oftentimes leaders think that, okay, we shared it in one of our all hands meetings and now it's done. Of course, it doesn't happen like that. And the last one is that not involving people, that's the biggest mistake. You want to get people on board to plan it and execute. And probably the biggest wisdom in the organization lies in the people and not just in the leadership. So maybe I would mention those 3.
Well, impatience, time, and then making sure people are involved. Liam, anything you wanted to add to the mistakes that leaders are making?
Yeah, so I mean, from what I see and my experience is, the most common reason that transformation projects or change projects fail is when people fail to identify and put support to the people aspect of the change. So I talk about something that I call the 4 keys to transformation success. So you have technology, strategy, process, and then that people and change piece as well. And often people get kind of tunnel vision on 1 or even 2 of those things. And they can do them quite well. They can buy a great piece of technology. They can employ a great new innovative strategy that they've read about in the market. But I think what's really important and what drives success is thinking about all four of those things collaboratively rather than in isolation, because you can't achieve the transformation success you're looking for unless they are considerate of each other. So those are the things that really stand out in my mind, and people make mistakes. They buy a piece of technology, but they don't put the effort into the change management, or they don't put in place the strategy that allows the people to employ the technology in the right way, or they don't build an easy step-by-step process in order to effectively roll that out as well.
I mean, the idea of supporting people through change, obviously, I think it's really key, and you're really giving that in your answer. So thank you for that. Any specific tips that you would have for any leaders that delivers change across organization that you have here, Katariina, if you want to go for it?
Coming from a communication background, you might not be surprised if I mention communication first. I think there's a high need for alignment and consistent communication. Nothing is worse than seeing leadership not having an alignment and talking their own stories across the organization. If we have a like global level, organizational wide, company wide change processes going on, you need to talk the same talk. And always rather over communicate than under communicate. When people start saying, why are we talking about this? We know all this stuff already. That's when you know you've actually succeeded, probably. Like, okay, enough is enough. Then people are like, okay, now I know that. And for leaders, get out of your silos, work towards shared goals, and not driving your own causes and politics, because that's gonna hinder the execution of the change, whatever the change is. It's so easy to kind of like, okay, yeah, we agreed on this, but then on a practical level, you're still kind of like doing your own thing, and might be hindering a lot what actually needs to get done. And one thing that I want to mention, and I think that relates to what Liam has been repeating here as well, on the people part, that we need to understand that emotions are an integral part of any change. And we need to allow room for that. And leaders need to be empathetic. You need to seek to understand people and not assume that you know what they think or need, and kind of like create situations where people can express the feelings as well. How do we support team leads in kind of like enabling that, and also taking that in? It's not easy at all to kind of like manage the emotional atmosphere with change. But if we're talking about hard decisions as well, that you always need to give the room for kind of like people to vent out what they need to get out and move forward and accept and then commit as well.
Absolutely. Liam, anything you wanted to add to these 4 tips?
Yeah, I think I wholeheartedly agree, and I think back on the kind of like the leaders point, I think where I've seen it be like really unsuccessful, and like big mistakes I've seen leaders make, is when they try and sell the change or try and build rapport with their organizations, but without being truly honest about the reasons why. They've created something that they think that the end users want to hear and will help push the change. And it actually has the opposite effect, because what you get is distrust, because they've underestimated almost the intelligence of their organization to not see through that kind of facade that they've put up, which just like damages things and change management projects. If you get off on the wrong foot, it's very hard to course correct. Like I've had to do change management projects where I've been brought in after a failed change management projects, and those are always so much harder. So if you started off on the wrong foot because of that, not being truly genuine as to why. And I think that comes back to the piece that I said about identifying different value propositions. So you can have a value to the CFO, right? They want to save money and be honest about this is going to save us money. Have a value proposition to a leader, which is you don't have to be the bad guy asking for reports every week, because now we can automatically report these kind of things, whatever the case may be. And to maybe somebody further down the organization gets to finish work on time, or gets to remove some mind-numbing admin task, but being fully transparent about the reasons why, it just builds that more on that trust without going back to that, which, yeah, it puts it in a more transparency. It's best to be open and honest and not try and hide anything back.
Absolutely. So over communications, trust, I mean, it's the basis of building a good relationship either way. And I think, you know, to the points of the leaders, they often do have to do multiple tasks all at once whilst implementing a change. Is there any kind of quick wins or any like specific tips that you would have for those overwhelmed leaders as well?
Yes. So I always push organizations to build what I call a change network. So it's not just one leader taking responsibility for the change. You have people at different levels, different spaces in the organization taking responsibility for it as well, because they can see things from different points of view, and they can also encourage their peers to want to be involved as well. So what I'll often advise organizations to do is have kind of that exec sponsor level, but also have that kind of director level, also have that kind of management level and that end user level from a technology perspective, to all be involved in the strategy, the planning and the change management rollout. And then what it also does is takes the burden off just one person. So one leader's decided to make a change, or they've decided to buy a piece of technology, or whatever the case may be, like that person's got a day job, they're doing 100 things. As Katariina was mentioning earlier, like they've been talking about that change for months and months. It's pretty boring for them, but it's the first time that other people might have like identified it. So if you're taking on all of that responsibility yourself, then it can be overwhelming and you miss things, and you're not maximizing the talent that you have at your organization.
Absolutely. And Katariina, I saw you react to that question. Is there anything you wanted to add?
My initial reaction to this question was like, hey, jump on the slide and hope for the best. I wish I had a magic trick to manage the burden of change and its overwhelming impacts. But I agree with what Liam was saying, that you need a network and you need support across the organization. Definitely. But I think it also comes to leadership, like how do we balance the load and how do we prioritize? Because yes, we need to do 100 things at any given time, but we really can't do that. So what are the actual priorities, and what can we postpone? What can we do later? What doesn't actually need to be done at all? And sequence initiatives based on the people impacts. Not easy at all, for sure, but something to think about. And also, how do we create a safe environment psychologically for the continuous change? How do we create certain routines that sustain a sense of control? Because usually the overwhelming feeling comes from not having a sense of control. So how can we help alleviate that? And I think it was Minna who was mentioning in the chat that sometimes it also feels that not even the leaders are not ready to change. Of course, they're not ready to change because it's hard. It's hard for them as well. It doesn't magically happen that when you become a leader, then you're just wholeheartedly embracing change in every aspect. But circling back to what Liam was saying, that you need the network and the support across organizations for leaders as well.
Absolutely.
Often they're the hardest ones, right? They're like 30 years into their career, they've done things one way that whole time. Sometimes they're the hardest people to change.
Yeah, that's what we were saying at the beginning of the conversation. You know, you want change, but you don't necessarily want to change. And how do you, add on to these new behaviors? So yeah, spot on here. And thank you, Minna, for your question in the chat as well. I do have another one that would challenge that too, is how do you know when to step in and start to challenge management during transformations? Katariina, do you want to go for it?
I think this is an interesting question, especially given an organization in where I work right now myself, because I think you should be able to challenge management at any given time. But I know I work in a particular organization. It's not the same reality in all organizations. I don't know whether I can give you an exact point or advice like when is time, but ideally in a change management process, or a project, you would have people involved, engaged, and given the opportunity to voice their opinions and worries along the way. Like you arrange that people don't have to kind of like wait for the right moment, but they're given the opportunities to do that. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that that everybody needs to be in agreement with everything. Like when you already give people the chance to express their worries, that's already a lot of things. Like we can agree to disagree and then commit and move forward. And eventually the leadership, of course, do the decisions and make the decisions. Mm-hmm. But I think overall, and this is circling back to trust again, is the leadership able to take the feedback in? Do people trust their leadership so much that they can give the feedback? Mm-hmm. And I think asking hard questions is always good. That's the only way to improve. And it shows the blind spots that you might have in the process, that like, okay, we didn't figure that out yet, or, oh, we never thought about that aspect when we were preparing for this. Mm-hmm. So it's great support for the leadership as well, but it requires a lot from the leadership to be vulnerable in a way that, okay, we don't have it all figured out, and we need our people to kind of like complement our thinking, to get the bits and pieces together. And I think in change, not everything is going to be clear. Like it's a lot of burden to carry on as a leader, especially like you don't know everything, and that makes you vulnerable, and kind of like you need to accept that as well. That was a long answer to a very simple question.
Yeah, but a very, very necessary answer. Thank you for sharing that. Liam, do you have anything to add on top of that? Challenging management is always, it's a big question mark in general, but love to hear what you say.
Yeah, and to jump back to we were talking about the why. Like I'm always asking why, and it sounds like Katariina is too. And like you almost become that like annoying devil's advocate in every meeting, because you're asking, why are we doing this? And what I'd add to that is also like, what does success look like? Because if you can't define that, then we're in trouble, because we need to know what we're aiming for. And myself, like sort of partnering with technology sales people. And if they can't tell me why the customer and or the customer can't tell me what success looks like, then it's hard. People get focused on things like features and functionality and what those things could be, but none of those mean anything if nobody uses them. So why are we jumping in to demonstrate how great this product is if we don't know what their pain point is and what we're looking to push them towards? I think about things from a full transformational aspect, rather than just, oh, we can plug in a bit of technology that's going to do this thing for you. Isn't it really cool? So doing that, and I love what Katariina said around the not being able to plan for everything, because another cheesy line for you, they say strategy walks on 2 feet. You've got what's planned and what's emergent, right? But I think being aware of that and having processes in place that can be agile enough to deal with the emergent things that come out. Because yeah, of course, we'd love to plan everything and have the perfect change management program and rinse and repeat it, and it works perfectly every time. But that's just not the case. But by having mechanics in place, having that change network, like having that collaboration with the people at different levels, it allows you to be able to deal with those emergent things when they come, and hopefully steer the change management the right way. Because that's the other thing that people think about with change management. They think it's like, oh, it's a 3-month project and it's done. It's not, because when we get to that 3 month, we're on to the next thing that we're changing, or something's emerged in month 2 and we're doing something else. So just being aware and being comfortable with that gives you an advantage.
And also like keeping that consistency, right? You're actually pinpointing something that is very important. Every time there's a new change, you feel like you've succeeded because people have applied a new process or changed something, etc. But actually it's something that should be ongoing. It's not something that should be like, okay, we've reached that goal and that's it. And keeping that consistency and like check in again to that change is something that's quite difficult to achieve in general. Katariina, I don't know if you have any thoughts around this, but at least that's what I find.
This is your experience as a customer success manager coming out there, right?
I'm gonna have to talk for my people here. Yes.
Yeah, I fully agree with the consistency, because and it links to repetition as well, kind of like you need to kind of like say it again and again and again. As I said, like when people get sick and tired, if then you know that they've actually got it. But yeah, fully agree with that.
Good. This was another question that I found really interesting, is how do you actually manage change during acquisitions and merger, which had happened in our, tech spaces often in the last year. So would love to hear your point of view here. Katariina, if you want to go for it.
Sure. A super interesting topic. We had our first M&A earlier this year at Smartly, so we've done our share as well. But that's a whole separate project, and depending on the scale, they can be smaller ones or huge ones. And of course, it depends on which side you are of the game, if you are the buyer or the seller, and what's the type of the M&A. That affects a lot, kind of like what type of change management are we doing. Again, starting with the why are we doing this acquisition? Why are we selling our organization? Why does this merger make sense for both parties?
And being honest about why.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think in our type of organizations, the rationale is usually pretty clear. Like you've had an investor who wants to do an exit, and then this happens, or like you don't have to create a lot of storyline. Of course, it's good to be able to do that, but what's the why behind? But I think here, especially for the company that is being bought, creating psychological safety, that's the key. Like how do we make sure that people don't panic? People are, because they're going to be worried anyway. So how do we navigate that to the greatest extent? Creating direction and clarity, addressing people's worries in both organizations. Yeah, we can do the greatest acquisition for us, but it might still be worrying for some parts of our organization. So, okay, if we're buying that, they're doing that better than we are doing. What happens to my team or my function? So giving room again for the worries and the emotional reactions that take place. But what I would say, and kind of like circling back to my background in comms consultancies, and I've done a lot of M&A projects in the past, they're intense projects, they're fast timelines, people are working around the clock on top of their own work. That's kind of like often the reality as well, that they just start like this, they come along, and nobody really realizes how much it actually takes, and you need 150% of your effort on top of the 110 you were already doing. So if you do have the budget and the resources to take external resources, do that. That's my advice. And the last point that I will make here is that, again, we have the prep work, we have the pre, then we have a D-Day. Okay, now we announce the acquisition or the merger, but then the post-merger part is probably the most important one. There's a huge amount of work in the pre-work and preparing for sharing it to the people, but then the actual reality hits again. So that's the hardest part. And if that hasn't been planned or resourced, then you're screwed. It's not going to go too well. I think there's this old saying, I don't know whether it's Harvard Business Review or McKinsey wisdom, saying that 90% of mergers and acquisitions don't succeed because you don't do the post work. I might be saying that the figures now wrong, but I think there's a lot of truth in that as well.
Absolutely. Liam, anything you want to add on top of that?
Yeah, and I agree. It's a delicate time, and I think what I always aim to do, and what I always advise people to do, is to try and remove any friction points, identify where those friction points might be in your planning stage, and look to remove them. And like, without this turning into a sales pitch, this is actually one of the products that Okta has from an IT perspective. Is around when you're doing a merger and acquisition, how you can consolidate domains. So creating one global address book, giving people in day one access to the parent company apps or the apps of the new company that you're bringing in as well. So without jumping too much into a sales pitch, what this means in terms of positivity for your organization is that they instantly feel like they're part of the organization, but without to lose their identity. And from that perspective, you kind of like remove potential friction points of us and them, because it kind of becomes one big family. And if you've got your communications right, which is Katariina's expertise around the why, what we're doing here and what the future is for the new now merged companies, or the parent company and the acquired company, then you can remove those frictions points and move towards what should be a happy marriage, right?
Absolutely. I think, Katariina, you mentioned this at the beginning as well, but like culture is very important during, I think specifically during an M&A, right, where you have now two other different cultures coming into your own. Is there anything that you would, I don't know if it's a tip, or I don't know if it's something that you've seen, but like, how have you seen successful M&A specifically in relations to culture and bringing them together?
I think it comes to the pre-work already. Like, are we culture fit together, or are we even a culture add together? And evaluating that before we make any decisions on the M&A. And I think sometimes it is wise to make a decision like independent of all financials and that aside, but like, we are not a match. Like, if we bring two big organizations together, it doesn't make sense. It's going to be too hard because we're coming from very different backgrounds. Then on the flip side, if it's a perfect match, it can go so easily. But I think it always requires work together and collaboration, and kind of like, okay, we've had our set of values and you have your culture. Now we're coming together. Are we gonna kind of like suck you in ours, or do we create something new together? And that's again engaging people, bringing them together and helping them to define the values and the culture. Like, okay, now we are this new organization. What does it mean for us together? But I'm not saying at all that that would be easy. That's a huge amount of work.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, change is never easy, as you were saying at the beginning, and beautiful things come out of difficult situations either way, whether it's life or whether it's work. So nothing comes easy. The last question I have for you is, how were you able to build trust? Because that is like really the main and the basis of change management, as from what I hear, specifically in, the remote working aspect of this world now, because it's easy when you can talk to someone face to face and then talk to multiple people face to face and tell them, okay, this is why we're changing, and actually like deliver that passion one-to-one. But how about virtually?
So, yeah, I mean, I like to look at these things positively, and I think about the kind of forced change as a potential opportunity. And if you look at organizations like Zoom, who we're using today, like they jumped on an opportunity, and they've grown crazily over the last few years as a result of. But also, like, the ripple effect of that is the fact that the three of us are able to do this breakfast meeting right here. And like, I'm in London, you're in Switzerland, right, Rary? And we've got Katariina in Helsinki. Yeah. So like the beauty of that and the opportunity that we've been able to drive from that is amazing. And I think I like to look at those companies like Zoom. You've got like Deliveroo in the UK, and the food apps have shot up. We've got these like Getters, the Gorillas, that are like doing like quick grocery deliveries. I like to think back to companies like BlackBerry, who actually had a stronger hold on the market and didn't take the opportunity that they had, and now like nobody's really using them. Everybody uses like iPhones and Samsungs, etc. So I appreciate I've taken a slightly different spin on your story, because like in terms of building organizational trust around, are you working on time and all that kind of thing, I think that's a slightly different angle to what my expertise is. But what I like to see is like companies taking the opportunity of the forced change to actually grow and do different things, because actually like tech has boomed in COVID, and as much as the horrible things have gone in COVID, there's been loads of opportunity for tech companies to raise money, to grow, to move into different markets, which has been really exciting from an innovation point of view, and that's what gets me excited.
I can hear that. What about you, Katariina?
this is starting to be slightly annoying because I'm again agreeing with Liam here. We should find something that we disagree on. But speaking from our experience at Smartly, we've almost doubled our size in terms of headcount during the pandemic. We've really benefited from the market here, so definitely taking the advantage of the changes. But if we think about the question you were asking, Rary, how do we build trust? Transparency, openness, vulnerability in the organization, engagement, involvement, shared ownership, even in terms of owning the company as well. Like where does the trust start from? How can the leadership be open and transparent? Again, not creating stories that are not exactly true, but being very honest, the good, the bad, and the ugly, sharing that. How do we engage people? Does the leadership actually walk the talk? Do they lead by example? And how do we create opportunities for dialogue and feedback in the organization? I think independent of whether we are in person or whether we are in virtual setups, that's something that we need to proactively do to have the trust, and kind of like you need to build the trust first. We're not very trusting by nature either, coming back to kind of like how do people work, but to build the trust, but also nurture the trust. Like it's not a constant, you need to work on that continuously. So how do we create those situations where we are actually being honest with each other and sharing the direct feedback and building on that as well?
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that answer, Katariina. I am at the end of the questions that I've had for you guys, so I really want to make sure that the people who joined us today are able to ask any questions. There is a Slido link if you'd prefer, but we are a nice, intimate group of people, so please feel free if you have any live questions to ask Katariina or Liam. I really want to make sure that this time is yours as well. Let me know if you have any issues joining the Slido.
I think we've done it, Katariina. We've perfectly described how to run change management, right?
Exactly. Now they know, and now they will run free and wild and execute perfectly.
Love it. In any case, to summarize what you guys were saying, which you said so many amazing things for us, and thank you, Effie. Yes, it was super helpful. I think I've noted the why. I've written why everywhere. I think it's the most important thing from what I've heard today, making sure, and this was not a cheesy line, but I've never heard about it before, but trusting the currency of change, I think is very powerful here. Katariina, you mentioned this a lot as well, but like putting the people first, understanding the emotional aspect of change, as well as making sure that we have support, technical support, and also investing in your people on the long run, as opposed to just thinking about the short-term benefits of changes. Obviously, trust over communicating. I think that's, as in any relationship, that's how you get to from A to Z. And also, I think something that is really great about what you're saying about being in a time of crisis right now, this is how you get opportunities to innovate. So thank you, Liam, for sharing that aspect. I think it's very true. Unfortunately, as humans, we only actually change whenever there's a crisis happening. And then finally, I think going through the whole, this is me dumbing down your beautiful work, but just understanding really here is that there is a resistance happening there, but in order to make sure that we get to the acceptance part of change, there's a whole lot of steps to go through. The first one being transparent, making sure that we trust each other, the leadership, as well as everybody working in that, being open and making sure that everyone is involved and engaged in that project, because changes doesn't just happen because both of your work happens, right? It happens because everybody in the organization believe in the mission, in the culture, in the goals. Otherwise, you know, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. And I think that was really, really helpful what you said to us today. So thank you so much. I hope I summarized this the way you wanted it.
Yeah, very nice. I think, yeah, some great points there. I think it's nice to hear it summarized. Just all these like wild thoughts in our heads, just like put together nicely. It's nice to see.
Exactly.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It was very lovely to have you guys. I don't see any pending questions, but I'm sure if anyone has any questions, I'll send them your way. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for waking up for us, everyone on the call as well. And you will receive the recorded version of this talk today. And we hope to see you very, very soon. Thank you so much, Katariina and Liam.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Rary, for hosting.
Of course.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.